Hi, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. Sorry, getting started a little bit late. Welcome to my session. Thank you so much for being here on a Saturday morning while we're on a beach. I don't even know how this is possible. My name is Deanna Vickers, and I'm from Nashville. Anybody else here from Nashville by any chance? Everybody from Jacksonville? Anybody from Jacksonville? Awesome. This is awesome. All right, so the reason my title is Product Own Your Development is because I've recently gone through a transition from being a product owner and now a developer. So my career for the most part in the beginning was kind of project management, and then it kind of morphed into this product owner role for like probably the past 7 years. And then last year I went to Nashville Software School, which is like a 6-month full-time boot camp, and then learned how to become a Python developer, which is what I'm doing now. I work at a company called Smile Direct Club in Nashville. And just a little bit about me, I'm a huge music lover. I'm sure that's a surprise being from Nashville. Not the typical Nashville fare that I'm listening to right now, but is everybody in here working on a team that would be using Agile? All right, anybody not familiar with Agile? All right, so just in case, the product owner is the role on the project that kind of owns the vision of the product. So they kind of provide the initial idea for what the team is going to be working on and building, and then also over time they're the people that kind of own the decisions and priorities. So so coming from a role like that into the actual part of the process where I'm doing the building, I've found there to be a lot of benefit in having this other experience behind me. And I'm super excited to now be part of that actual building process too. I've worked with tons of teams, both like in-house teams and also agency teams, so doing like a wide variety of projects, and have worked with a wide variety of developers. And over the years, I've kind of noticed certain patterns about those people on the team that seem to be like really effective and also like really happy and satisfied in their work. And for me, making that transition, coming from more of like the support space into the build space, I wanted to learn how to be like that. So I've been doing a lot of like thinking and like going back to my developer friends and asking questions. And I thought this would be a wonderful topic to discuss among the community, so that other people have an opportunity to kind of see this path. So one of the reasons that I think it is so important to talk about it is, in spite of the fact that there are so many amazing things about being in the technology space, there's still an overwhelming proportion of people that are not happy. Like I'm amazed when I'm working at a company and I can see that leadership is trying very hard to keep the technology team happy and provide just everything that they possibly can in the way of tools and support and growth opportunities and trying to define a purpose. But in spite of that, sorry guys, I'll try and keep this going a little faster. So for me, that's kind of the reason that I think this is so important to talk about. Has anybody ever been on a team with people that are unhappy, or maybe you've been unhappy yourselves, right? And that makes for a work day that can be stressful and even painful. So what I've noticed about people that I kind of regard them as a super developer, these are the people that everyone wants to work with. These are the people that just seem to, in general, be happy. And I don't mean like court jester, happy, silly, or whatever. I mean just people that are content and satisfied in their work. And this does not seem to be dependent on where they are or even what team they're on. It seems to be like inherent in that person. Because a lot of my developer friends I've known for 10 or 15 or 20 years. And I could see that as they moved job to job, well, they were less likely to be moving job to job than other people. They seem to be more content and more able to kind of stay at a place and make it a happy experience for themselves. Something that I noticed about the way that they worked is under crisis, they were the person on the team that other people could turn to. And they were that force on the team that was kind of just a grounding element. They also had a steadfastness about them. They were not necessarily the most technically talented people on the team, but they were the person who would not give up. And they would persist. I mean, until, obviously, sometimes there were points where you have to change direction, just because it doesn't make sense to continue down a path. But those times when you have to, these are the people that you could count on to get to the solution. There were also people that were not only like felt it was a responsibility, but they seemed to be happy to do this, but helping other people on the team. Providing mentorship to people who were maybe not at the same skill level as them. So even though they might have been the most senior person on the team, sometimes I've noticed that with people at a senior level, they might have a tendency to become dissatisfied. Like they no longer see a challenge in front of them, or they no longer have someone that they can rely on the team for support technically. But these people especially, it didn't matter if they were in that role, they still found happiness in helping other people. They were also mature about the way they communicated. So even though they might need to push back or say no, they found ways to do this in a way that didn't hurt someone else. They found ways to do this that were respectful to other people. Like how many of you guys have experienced team meetings where it ended in a blow up or somebody cussing or somebody crying? Because I know I've seen all of it. Anybody? Right? So obviously, that just makes work unfun. And that's absolutely not what we want. So when thinking about this talk, obviously because of my career transition, I just kind of wanted to break it out into areas of product ownership that are pretty common, that I think everyone can relate to. And then what I'm gonna do is kind of talk through, like, what is the normal thing that we do for each of these elements? And then what are those special things that those super developers do? And I know it sounds trite, but it's just a way to identify that particular person on the team. So roadmaps. Roadmaps are something that product owners love. I do too. They're visual, they're just like a high-level explanation of the direction and vision of the product over time. I love it because I'm very much like a long-term goal setter. And so for me, this is something that really helps me keep focused. And another awesome thing is, like so many things that I've learned about project management, product ownership, and now that I'm learning about development, I can take those things and apply it directly to my own life, my own career. And so I have like this little roadmap for myself for my career. And I'm still probably working on it and refining it a bit as I'm learning how to be a developer. But I kind of see myself like at the early phase right now, learning the technical skills to be a competent developer. And then at some point in the future, I will probably want to focus in an area that makes me happy, which would probably be something maybe environmental. And that's the awesome thing about our industry is that you always have an opportunity to kind of shift your focus to somewhere that could possibly excite you. Like say you're a music lover, well, maybe you want to apply at a company that manufactures instruments, or they manage distribution of music. Or maybe you're an animal lover, so you can work on an app for veterinarian, or maybe you're gonna go work for ASPCA. There are just so many opportunities, I think, to use development in a way that would be meaningful for you. And it's one of the main reasons that I wanted to move into this space. So for me, my roadmap looks kind of like, the beginning phase of just learning the skill, the second phase of focusing on a purpose, and then ultimately, I think my end game will probably be like space travel. That's something I've always been really nerdy about, but I know that I'm going to require a lot of skill accumulation before I can be of any help in that arena. So something that I've noticed about other developers that happen to have this kind of attitude about their work and their life is that they seem to have a particular idea of what their future looks like as well. For me, it's kind of like the difference between somebody writing a really interesting episode for a TV show versus someone who can write out several years of a series like Expanse, which I love. It's that difference between having this short-term vision versus being able to have this long-term vision. And so I'm just a huge fan of this kind of planning, and that's something that I've noticed among these super developers. That's something that they do. Obviously, part of that whole planning is to have tactical milestones, and those are kind of the lower level things that they would focus on from like a day-to-day basis. The next thing that is super in the space of a product owner is prioritization. So I think at times what I've noticed on a team, the PO is regarded as a person who manages and owns the priority. In some cases, I've noticed it almost hampering the process a bit because it was just left to them. And they didn't really have the support of the rest of the team in order to be able to prioritize effectively. So in that instance, what I would see is just that developers would provide a little bit of input here and there, but they didn't really engage in that process to the point where they felt like they were partnering. But that was the difference between somebody who was at the level, and maybe they were just learning like me, or maybe they were mid-level, but people who I would, again, consider in this super developer category, they are the people that like truly own it. Like they want to understand the user almost to the same level that the product owner does. So they're in the meetings discussing the product vision, and if something comes up that they are unfamiliar with, well, they're going to raise their hand and say right away, that's something we've never worked with. That's a technology that our team doesn't know. Can we build in some time to the schedule to do a little research? And maybe that research even takes place before it's added to the priority. That would be the best case scenario. That's not always the case, obviously. But this person also feels like they're allowed to stand firm and protect the team. So sometimes when expectations are being set, I'm sure all of you have experienced this, that we want the world and we want it tomorrow. And that's simply just not going to work, right? Just a little thing. So the competent, effective developers know that they must speak up. So even in a situation when you might have like a vice president or a president as your product owner, and it seems too intimidating to say no, these people know that they must, and they do. And that is for the sake of not only themselves, but for the whole team. Because what happens when the most senior person in the room or the most confident person in the room does not say no? Then the whole team is screwed, right? And that's just not going to work to anyone's benefit. And I mean, this is how dissatisfied workplaces happen. So beyond just prioritizing the product, again, I want to relate this back to like your career and your life. Super developers also prioritize various things around their career. Like in terms of coming up with that direction, like mine, they're prioritizing where they want to go, and they're establishing those tasks and milestones, and they're prioritizing them. So like something that I'm interested in learning today, I might find out after doing a bit of research that it's really not going to fit the bill for where I want to go long term. And so then I have to simply change direction or change my plan a bit. But I think what I've noticed is if you have a solid long-term plan, then the short-term goals are kind of interchangeable. The next piece of the product ownership is understanding that pretty much everything we're doing is an experiment. So I know that this can be like the most painful part of being on an agile product team, and that is that the product owner will invariably change direction. And it could be small or it could be huge. One of the best things about Agile, obviously, is the fact that we don't have to go through this rigorous, bureaucratic, red tape-infused process in order to change things. But what it does mean is that, for instance, if you're running Scrum, which I know a lot of people are still running Scrum, what that does mean is you're going to have to possibly break the sprint. You might have to be rewriting stories or re-grooming and understanding things in order to accommodate the change. And so that's like what the expectation would be for the team at that basic level. But at this higher level, at this super developer level, they do more than that. They also help the team understand why the business might be making this decision. They will ask the question directly, why are we making this change? Or maybe they can't see the benefits, so they'll continue to question in order to understand. They're not just going to sit back and say, oh, okay. No, that isn't part of their mindset. And
They shouldn't, right? They should, if they do that, they're not enrolling in the cause of the business. So they're essentially becoming order takers.
Yes.
Order takers never give the involuntary effort that we need, not just the voluntary effort, right? We need that effort that we need for that.
Yeah.
We really stand up. I mean, the whole agile process is based on aligning software development to the business needs.
Yes.
And we're not always driving to all the business needs, but unless we know we're not going to enroll in the cause,
yes.
if we enroll in the cause, the team is going to give their most, at best, the least they can give, right?
Right. I agree. Thank you for that.
And we definitely should encourage everybody to ask, why is that we're doing? We're not just order takers here. We need to know what's the reason behind the change. Just because Agile is flexible doesn't mean you want to change direction every minute.
Right.
But that's the whole point of Agile.
It is.
And it's very frustrating when you see somebody just silently accepting. That's for me, it's not accepting, it's a silent listening. It's worse than anything.
It is. I could not agree more. As a product owner, I so value developers who would question me and question the vision of the product and question the decision of the business. That is exactly what I wanted. And oftentimes I would invite that. I'd be like, so what do we think about this? Do we have any questions, any concerns? And the worst feeling for me was that no one responded. Who in here has pushed back hard on a decision that somebody wanted to make a change? Thank you for that. Thank you for that. If your product owner was worth their salt, they enjoyed it too, I promise you. So something else that these super effective developers do in the case of changes being presented is they find value in the change of direction. Like once they understand why the change is needed or why the decision is being made, then they get behind it fully and they help the team to understand that as well. They also find value in throwaway work. Sometimes it can be so, I know that I've had this happen recently. I've had 2 of my tickets that I spent almost 2 weeks on a piece be sidelined because of the change in business direction. And while it was a little tough to have put in that time and not have it actually be a part of the code base, other people on my team were super supportive about it, and they made me feel like there was still value in the work that I did because I had an opportunity, especially being a junior, to learn a lot along the way. And so it was really a great experience, now that I'm on this side of the fence, to kind of see that happening in real time. I thought it was so cool. Another thing that I've always been a fan of is the careful adoption of new technologies. So like within this whole area of change on a project, I have had the unfortunate experience of having to restart a project after we were 6 months in and completely change the platform. It was not fun. But the reason it was done was because an integral part of the application that kind of came up during the process of developing it could not be accommodated well on the platform we were on. So it was a necessary change. But I've also seen situations where we would just choose a technology that we did not carefully consider, and that would come back to bite us. So I much prefer to see situations where we're not just jumping in because it's new and flashy, but instead taking a very considered approach before moving into some new technology space. Another thing that I see these highly skilled developers doing is to encourage collaboration for these changes. So on some teams I've seen where like 1 or 2 people will be focused on making the changes, but they won't really explain it to other people. So something that these amazing developers do as part of being a good team member is not only to make sure people understand it, but then pairing with them and making sure that everyone understands well how to work with the new changes. Before we move on to this, does anybody have any questions for things we've discussed so far? Yeah.
One comment. This that you showed earlier, it just reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of that, so for me, yeah, please.
Do you find a coordination between culture and super developers?
Actually, very little. What I find more often is super developers are more the creators of the culture. Like leadership can try to pass down culture all day long, but if there aren't certain people that are part of the team, like representing a culture, then it isn't going to happen. That's been my experience.
How about side projects? You talk about a couple line items there. We see that super developers have the ability to bring in newer technologies because they're not only working on things internally, but also externally.
Okay, well, there's a great example of when like leadership adding value to the culture definitely does apply. So I've worked at a few places where we had time to work on research or just personal development, but it was like during our work schedule. And so in that case, for sure, that would be something that was a leadership culture influence. But then again, it was still these super developers who actually really took a hold of that and went out and discovered something, brought it back to the team and showed everybody. It wasn't everyone who did that. You know what I mean? There were a lot of people who spent time doing personal development, but they didn't necessarily bring back anything to show for it. So it's kind of both, I think, but more so, I think, in the hands of the developers.
Have you seen the ability for non-super developers to become super developers?
Oh, by all means, absolutely.
Any techniques there that you've seen that help with that?
Yes, I think the things that we're talking about are accessible to absolutely anyone to do. You know what I mean? It's not magic. It's just like making decisions about things. I'll go through probably a little more in terms of relating and communicating with the team in this next section. And I think that will highlight more in terms of like attitudes and behaviors. But yes, I absolutely believe anyone can do this, and I'm hopeful that this is the kind of developer that I will become. All right, so it's definitely the objective of a product owner or anybody kind of in this agile frame of mind that the team would become self-actualized. In some cases, what people consider a self-actualized team isn't necessarily what I would consider a self-actualized team. It's basically a team that is capable of taking on work, performing the work, but to that next level, to that highly skilled developer level, what I see is that they're not simply doing the work, they're also spending the time getting to know their teammates. Because, I mean, if you think about it, and I know this is probably going to sound super hokey and stuff, but like Bad News Bears, Goonies, any of these movies that depict like a ragtag group of kids who have nothing in common and like stand no chance against whatever obstacles come in front of them, it's their bond. It is the fact that they actually give a crap about each other that makes it possible for them to confront these huge obstacles and overcome them. So there have been a few times in my life, in software and out of software, where I've been a part of a team that I've felt super connected to, like more so than family at times. And like you would do anything for these people. And so in those cases, when whatever happens, it does not matter, because you're still a team, you're still closely connected, and the way that you communicate with each other is with caring and respect, and sometimes ribbing and sarcasm, but that kind of goes with it. But what I'm saying is that when you have a team dynamic that is so strong, then you can overcome any challenges.
And almost all self-actualizing teams are self-organizing.
Correct.
Very little leadership or management or external influence to see what needs to be done.
Right.
You know, they are just taking charge and you just stand back and just let them be. Don't get in their way, kind of.
Right. Exactly. And I know some people want to consider self-actualized meaning that they take their own tickets, but that's not the level that I'm talking about. Another thing that is a part of the communication that happens among a team like this is that they bridge communications when there's conflict. So say two people on the team are having a heated argument. Another person on the team might be able to step in and help mediate. Or maybe the two people that are having the heated discussion are going to have the wherewithal to speak to each other with kindness and empathy. And I love that these terms are becoming more and more prevalent in our workspace, because it's so important in terms of treating each other like human beings and not vilifying people on the team that you hate or whatever. That's just not good. That's not good for you. Another thing that this person would do is to make sure that everyone is heard. I've seen this many times with people that I consider part of this group of people, is that not only does the whole team like have immense respect for them, but they also make space for the whole team. It's not like they're trying to showboat. It's not about that. And I think that is part of what makes them so incredibly valuable. So to your question, I think all of these are very doable by anyone. I think it's just a matter of practicing and, I don't know, learning how to make this part of what you do.
I think that I was just wondering if there was a methodology that you use to actually get these practices in place rather than allowing the team to try to culture it themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think these are things that need to be discussed. You know what I mean? I think some people just come about these behaviors naturally. It's just the way they are, the way they work. But these are things that we need to discuss as a team. From the time that you do your team kickoff, something that I love having a team that's closely connected, so I would do everything I could to help ensure that for the team. And so I definitely talked about things like this at the very beginning with my teams. And I would encourage them all, and in some cases kind of make it happen, that they spend time together to get to know each other in the beginning, because that will make or break your project. Another thing that's kind of tied in with this whole building a team is active engagement. And again, this is something sometimes you have to teach people. What I mean by that is when you're speaking in a meeting, try and speak with a voice that other people can hear. Try not to, make your voice sound, you know what I mean? Sometimes when you're tired, it's natural to kind of feel like you just want to talk like this. But, you know, in order to bring yourself to the meeting and be a part of the group, you have to kind of force yourself in some cases to speak up or speak with a little energy in your voice. And even those of us that do it because it was part of our job, we don't like it any better than anybody else does, but we do it because it's helpful. Another thing that is part of being on a self-actualized team is being able to push back. And this is probably the best thing for team bonding. And that is when you're presented with something that you must say no to. Well, I mean, hopefully the whole team can agree on the fact that you do need to say no. And then also why you're going to say no. And then come up with a way to present this back to whoever needs to be told no. That is very healthy, and a team that is self-actualized is capable of doing that in a way that is, again, respectful, and yeah.
One thing I've heard someone say is that you never go to your manager and present them cake or death, because they'll always choose death. So instead of saying no, you give them cake or cake.
Yes.
So you never say, no, I can't ever do that, because they'll go bother someone else, and they'll make a really bad choice and screw everyone. And so you always give them alternate ways of doing it. You try to look at their end goal.
Yeah.
And you say, here's 2 other delicious cakes that I can give you. Don't they look great? Which would you like?
Yeah.
And that's your way. I think that's a great way of saying no to folks.
Yeah.
Actually saying no.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm a big fan of providing back options. Or maybe you don't exactly know what options to provide back. In that case, you set a meeting and you ask a bunch of questions until you can get to that point.
You don't, it becomes personal.
Yeah.
Solve a problem.
Yes.
It's not a problem. Right?
Yes, and that's absolutely not what you want. And as much as possible, you want the work itself to remain not personal. So, yeah, in fact, whenever I was presented with a problem on the team, it was always a communication issue. I tried really hard for the way that I approached it, and also the way that I would encourage others to approach it as well, is like, Jay missed that really super important client meeting with us today. I'll bet he's sick. I'll bet something, you know what I mean? Like, I would always assume the best possible scenario, and I would not let other people just assume that they were skipping or slacking or whatever. And I know it's a pretty basic example, but I think it's just always healthy.
Important example. That's an extremely important example.
Yeah.
My whole team will say if somebody's not there, I'm assuming they're doing something that's really important.
Yeah.
Everybody on my team knows that.
Yeah.
Don't just, if you don't think that all negativity starts creeping up and nature wants to vacuum.
Yeah.
It's some garbage, right?
Right. Agreed. And at the end of all, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I felt like you were about to get into proxy no. So you were talking about feeling empowered to say no. Were you referring that you actually have a methodology of allowing the introverts and other team members to have the ability to proxy through the super developer?
I don't think that's necessary, and in fact, that would never be my goal. My goal would be that each person on the team feels empowered to say no. And I think part of what this super developer could do is provide a space for that. So in terms of what you could do to learn how to be like this, hey, how does everybody feel about this? Maybe even call specifically out the quiet person on the call. Hey, Tom, what do you think? You know what I mean? Some people feel like it's too abrasive to call on a particular person. But I think if all you're doing is inviting them to speak, I feel fine about that. Like, I'm not trying to put them on the spot. And sometimes if I feel like they might be nervous or whatever, I'd be like, you could say no, or you know what I mean? Just try and make it very comfortable and open. But I think as far as the super developer's role in that is simply creating the space. But my hope is that everyone would feel empowered to say no.
So sometimes I've noticed, you talked about calling on people, sometimes I've noticed as well that the quieter people on the team are sometimes facially very vocal, right? Like you can see on their face, they have a thought.
Yeah.
Approved. And so any member of the team can say, you know, hey, Joe, Sarah,
Yeah.
it's like you have a thought on this, what do you think? You know?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because I also wanted to add that sometimes when people are quiet on a call, it's because they just feel uncomfortable for some reason. If I notice that someone is repeatedly being quiet, what I'll do is just set a sidebar with them, you and me. Let's just get to know each other a little better. And then what I've found is sometimes if people just have a comfort level with one person on the team, they feel so much better about opening up. It doesn't always work the first time, but I'm persistent. So that would be definitely a recommendation in order to get somebody to share on a team that might otherwise be quiet. But again, I do also think it's a perfect opportunity to call somebody out by name. And it's just because you want to know what they're thinking. You know, I would hope that no one would feel like they're being attacked just because you want to invite them to the conversation. And I think if you're doing that with genuine, I don't know, caring when you're asking for someone's opinion, I've rarely ever encountered somebody being hostile in response.
The company of an opportunity and opinion that otherwise won't be given, right? I mean, we're all
Yes.
you need to solicit that input because if not, you're having an opportunity for the whole team there.
Right. And I think, you know, as we become better and better at moving beyond, making mistakes and feeling weird about it, you know what I mean? As we just really embrace this process of experimenting, failure, learn, then that whole idea of embarrassing yourself by saying the wrong thing begins to diminish a little bit. And as the trust on the team goes up and up, then those times where you might otherwise be super embarrassed, it just becomes a moment that you could just laugh together. And not to like diminish what that feels like, because I know there have been times where I've said stupid stuff on meetings and I feel terrible about it. But, you know, it happens. It's just part of it. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to dive into is motivation, because as far as like company culture, I think this ties really closely to how the company treats people that motivates them to bring their best selves into work every day. And for me, I know there's a lot more, and I would actually love to hear feedback from you guys in regards to some of these things that I'm bringing up here. I think purpose, celebrating, and taking breaks are, for me, the three biggest things that help motivate me to continue working over time. I have a lot of young developer friends that feel like they never need a day off. They just love coding. They just want to code 24 hours a day. But they'll realize 20 years into this career that that's probably not going to be doable, and you're trying to manage a family, you've got pets, or you run a farm, or whatever else. So for me, in terms of remaining motivated, I guess a couple of other things that I forgot to add here. Something I've noticed among people that manage to come to work every day and be like, you know, energized and in it, they also have outside stuff. Those are not the 24-hour coders at all. Those are people that run a farm, they're in a band, they're mountain climbers. I mean, I've worked with some super cool people. But they have a life outside of just development. And I think that allows them to bring a perspective into work that is interesting. They're not just there to talk code all day. You could actually have a conversation about their life with them, and that, again, lends to the bonding of the team itself. So that's all I had as far as content, but I would love to spend a little bit of time. I think, what time have we got?
10:30.
We definitely have a little bit of time for some Q&A, and I would love to get some thoughts from you guys. Anybody?
I have one comment. You talk about super developers. The same thing can be, the entire presentation can be done for super manager, super director, super vice president, super president, and super CEOs.
Right, exactly.
Long-standing, time-tested disciplines that will go cut across every discipline, all these, you know.
Yeah.
So if we master these things, there's truly no limit to what we can achieve. So
Right.
software development.
It's also skills that don't expire like everything else that we've learned.
Exactly.
What
Yeah.
script framework are you going to know in 10 years?
Right.
These skills.
Right, exactly. Yeah, do you have the capacity to regard someone else in front of you that you disagree with, to be kind to them, to listen to them, to hear what they're saying, and then make a well thought out response? I think at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about here. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I was curious I felt like your presentation was geared towards people like yourself and some in the room, but in our shop we have developers that don't have the desire or want to do what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
We have some developers that would type up an email and give their opinion that would just blow your mind. But to call someone out in a meeting as an introvert, that's like a nightmare to them.
Yeah.
They freeze up. They would appreciate it if we wanted to do that. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
What other techniques you would use, or
In that situation.
and whether we learn by failures, so we try to fail fast. Obviously.
Yeah.
So what failures have you come across when dealing with even someone that will never want to become a super developer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it's probably, I don't know, that I don't necessarily mean everyone's going to become some sort of leader. That's definitely not the idea. But I think everyone can take pieces of this just for their own personal growth. You know what I mean? So yeah, I just tend to think about it from the perspective of my experience, what I've seen, and obviously the direction that I want to go in. But for sure, like pieces of this could be applied just to simply be a good team member. And being a good team member is understanding that if you know someone on your team has anxiety and would hate being called upon, then maybe you do just set a sidebar to get their thoughts, or you have them send you a chat message or whatever. I'm all for working within whatever it is people need. And so that would probably be my way to deal with a team member that, I mean, obviously I would have to talk to them to understand that that's what was going on. And I can totally appreciate that. But again, I think a lot of these are just part of being a good contributing member of the team. And maybe you're not looking for leadership, but maybe you are just looking to be happy in your work. Maybe you are looking just to have stability in your work and career. And stability to me doesn't mean necessarily staying at the same place for 20 years. Stability just means that you have the ability to work for a long time on your own terms. Yeah. What else?
So, a comment and a question, right? So, for colleague over here, I'm totally introvert. Every time I have to speak, I have a kit of anxiety I have to jump over. But at the same time, I know in my mental model, I need to overcome that for my professional career, right? I know that's the thing I have to deal with. It's just knowing a bit about myself, but that's table stakes. That's when coming together, you have to kind of communicate. You have to jump that bridge. Communication is the only problem, and it's the solution to that problem. So
Yeah.
that's coming from an introvert who's constantly fighting that. It can be overcome. Personally, I've overcome it to rise to in my company the director level of development. So it's not too late for anybody. It's not unovercome.
Yeah.
The other, another thing kind of related in a way is accountability. Like, how do you feel about that? Like a lot of times we leave those conversations about your team members not doing as good as they could to the management side of things, but a lot of times I feel like it's more effective when it's your peers, right? It's like, hey, like my company have Nintendo Switch, people play Smash Brothers on, right? But people can go over
Yeah.
10 hours every day.
Yeah.
You know, when you make
Agreed.
your commitment and come back. I mean, how do you feel about accountability? You think that's part of like being an effective peer on your team?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And back to your scenario, that is another indicator that maybe there's not trust on the team. Maybe they don't feel comfortable, but maybe some of those other tips, like scheduling one-on-ones between you and that person, or someone else on the team and that person, just for them to build up this comfort level. My husband has crippling anxiety, but even people with crippling anxiety still talk to people. But I do think it's a matter of kind of setting the stage and making it a space where they feel like it's okay to speak.
So that's why so first, thank you so much. I appreciate you standing up there.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you for that. And you were next.
The culture, like the question being is how, like what is what I'm trying to pull out here is to better myself as an extrovert to include, like we have some people that are deaf that are just amazing at doing something but they'll never participate.
Yeah.
So how did you overcome that? Or what could an extrovert do to help teammates either culturally or methodology, or how do you overcome that?
Did you want to add to what he was saying? Yeah.
One thing I found that I try to encourage is if you call on somebody just once out of the blue, it's very like, what's this about? But if every meeting's the quietest person has to speak out, or and if you start with the extroverts first and then they get the ball rolling, then the introverts can chime in at the end. You have this expectation going in that everybody's expected to speak. It creates an environment where it's less intense because everybody's there.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll even warn them. I'll say, listen, I notice you've been really quiet in our meetings, but I really want to hear you. I really want to know what you're thinking. So today, can you add your voice? And if you forget, I will remind you. You know what I mean? So just like set it up in a nice, easygoing way where they're like prepared and not caught off guard. But yeah, I probably have other ideas too. We could talk more after.
It is a very powerful tool, something to think about. Usually I know all my team members who they are. Once I know their type, I'm like, okay, there are some really good tools to say, okay, he's this type, so I'm going to approach it this way. And it's a very powerful learning tool for you, even if it doesn't work for everybody on your team. If you know who they are, you'll have an easy time to at least know, okay, this is how we can connect to it, right? So.
We used a tool at work called Crystal, and somehow, I think it's linked in with LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But what it is it's a personality assessment. It's pretty quick, but it also gives you the ability to connect with all of your teammates. So you can kind of see, like, what does it look like me compared to my manager? And it also like gives you some tips for handling communications between the two parties. I think we're just doing like a free version right now, but I think the paid version has opportunities to kind of see what a team dynamic is like together. But I'm a psychology major in my background, a huge fan of assessments. Not to like box people in or whatever, but just as a simple tool for understanding.
I'd like to add, in my experience, I saw that it helps sometimes to have kind of like a spokesperson with the team. Maybe the more extroverted people can like pool the thoughts and ideas of other team members and help bring them up, and then include those people. It's kind of like a little bit of a hand holding, but it would encourage people to speak up when they feel like their points and their ideas are being brought up. If they
I see what you're saying.
Somebody would kind of like be the spokesperson.
Somebody like a super developer. Somebody at their level, but who can help them.
Understand your team members.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't refer to that as a spokesperson role because that implies that the other team members aren't speaking up. But I get what you're saying. It's more of somebody who's kind of aggregating that communication. Yeah, I could see that. You back there?
So I've heard people say things along the lines of hire for culture, right? Like hire people who match and reinforce the team culture. How do you balance that with, not necessarily excluding the very valuable introverts that might not be an obvious match for team culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the balance there?
Well,
And I'm asking because I haven't.
I think you need to assess your team culture in a way that is outside of extrovert introvert. You know what I mean? So the factors that you're using to determine a culture fit shouldn't be about that, for starters. There are other things that I think you can measure people on. But I mean, I realize that it might be harder for introverts to go and interview with people, but there are other, like there are code challenges, there are some written exercises, there are opportunities to do one-on-one as opposed to a panel. I think, you know, if your company is interested in really having a good breadth of candidates, then hopefully they're going to be taking these steps to see people in all the ways that are possible to see people. Yeah. I know it's not always perfect, and that's a difficult question to answer, but left to me, I don't know. I just try not to evaluate on those things. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was going to add to the part of saying that somebody wants to read an email and kind of take a longer to get to it. I've actually been on the team with one developer, but it was a case where everyone to a degree would defer until that person sent the email. They weren't even the experts, like they give their opinion, but then it was more they rely on that person who would then send the email an hour or whatever later after they put the thoughts together, and that was where the pushback would come from.
Yeah.
Not from the person that spoke loud in the meeting, but from the person who, hour or two later, actually laid out the points and explained it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, it depends on the scenario too. You know what I mean? I can see if that there's some highly technical thing that only a few people are in on, that there might be some separation of the communication. But for the most part, we handle it in a meeting. You know what I mean? There's very little in the way of emails being sent. It's more just discussion being captured in meetings and stuff.
And we feel the opposite. We feel it was spinning our wheels, trying to get instantaneous satisfaction out of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
We found that, yes, we'll have a stand-up for a meeting, but my super developers might say 4 words in that particular meeting. So if
Okay.
I basically say, okay, if it's Tuesday, stand up, I like to basically say, on Thursday, I'd like to accomplish this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
The introverts and everybody basically puts in there, and I found that now we're not spinning our wheels anymore. We're just allowing each individual to communicate the best way that they know how to.
Yeah.
Allowing the extroverts to take over
Mm-hmm.
and try to give you that instantaneous satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
So I love different methodologies of communication.
Yeah.
Because there are people that aren't like me.
Yeah.
Because it's, to be honest with you, they're smarter and more powerful if I actually give them the tools to do.
Yeah. We always have our chat up during the meeting. So if somebody's in the meeting and just doesn't feel comfortable speaking up, there's always the opportunity for them to just throw something in chat. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan of providing other ways for people to weigh in on things. Yeah.
Just thinking about this, you know, most people are just uncomfortable in general when you don't know one another. So doing stuff outside of your regular company stuff, you know, like maybe going out for drinks together, lunch together.
Yeah.
It gets people to understand one another,
Yeah.
understand how to communicate with one another, which actually translates back into the office and how
Yeah.
to be developing a more comfortable with somebody. At least I found that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's another example of tying back to the company culture. So like our company definitely makes time once a quarter to do something big as a team. And then we have little stuff going on probably monthly as well. But yeah, it's just for that. And it's during work hours. So we're not asking people to stay after work or come outside of work. But that space is made in order to build that culture. I think we're at time. 10:40. Oh, we still have 5 minutes if anyone has any other questions. All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.